Fiona Bishop's last trace. A shadow. Over Bundaberg, in every corner of the world, even the most idyllic, shadows lurk. Shadows capable of consuming innocence, shattering routine, and forever changing lives. On May 17, 2025, these shadows enveloped Bundaberg, a sleepy coastal town in eastern Australia. A town where no one expected trouble. Until that day. Fiona Bishop, just 17. But even at her age, she knew the price of independence and the cost of loneliness. 2 years prior, having escaped her mother's suffocating overprotectiveness in Brisbane, Fiona found refuge in Bundaberg. It was a small town where everyone knew everyone, and life flowed steadily and predictably. Here, far from her past, Fiona tried to build a new life, working at the local supermarket and studying veterinary medicine by correspondence. Her dream was simple and pure: to help animals, heal them, and be useful to the world. Her character was quiet and somewhat reserved, but beneath this modesty lay one striking trait: an inexhaustible, almost painful, desire to help people. She might stay late after her shift to listen to a colleague's worries, give a ride to an acquaintance whose car broke down, or simply offer a kind word to a random passerby. This very kindness, this sincerity, this willingness to lend a hand, might have been her undoing. Fiona rented a room in a small, slightly dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. Her housemates were 29-year-old Jacob Wood, a former auto mechanic who, for some reason, no longer worked in his trade, and his 26-year-old girlfriend, Tanya Bromley, a nurse. At first glance, they seemed like a perfectly ordinary couple, reserved, avoiding noisy gatherings, but generally giving the impression of respectable citizens. However, as is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. Behind this ordinariness, behind the walls of their modest dwelling, seethed a volatile mix of unhealthy tension, suppressed envy, and dangerous dependencies that slowly but surely poisoned their lives. Fiona, in her naivete, didn't notice this hidden darkness, perceiving them as merely a bit strange but generally harmless people. On that fateful evening, May 17th, Fiona finished her shift around 10 p.m. Her silhouette was last captured by surveillance cameras at the nearest gas station. She walked down a deserted, dimly lit street, heading home, lost in her thoughts about upcoming exams and dreams of her future career. After that, nothing. No one saw her enter her house. No one heard her footsteps on the creaky stairs. She simply vanished. Her housemates, Jacob and Tanya, claimed they hadn't seen her return, suggesting she likely just hadn't made it home. Their initial composure seemed odd, but the police initially attributed it to shock. Bundaberg awoke to a profound shock. The disappearance of a 17-year-old girl became a personal tragedy for every resident. A massive search began immediately. Police teams scoured every square meter of the surrounding woodlands. Divers explored the murky waters of the local river, and hundreds of volunteers, from teenagers to pensioners, combed roadsides, peering into every ravine and bush. The town lived on hope, waking each day with Fiona on their minds. But neither her pink backpack, nor her mobile phone, nor even her keys. Nothing. Fiona vanished as if she had dissolved into thin air. The trail went cold, leaving behind only agonizing uncertainty. Mounting suspicion days turned into weeks. The initial wave of panic and hope for a quick resolution gave way to bitter emptiness. Hope faded, replaced by growing anxiety and incomprehension. After 3 weeks, investigators, faced with a complete lack of leads, began methodically re-examining all statements and paying attention to details that had initially seemed insignificant. It was then that their gaze focused on Jacob and Tanya. The couple's behavior grew increasingly bizarre. They refused to give detailed statements. Their answers were evasive and monosyllabic. Jacob appeared nervous and irritable, constantly avoiding eye contact. Tanya, in contrast, seemed unnaturally calm, almost lethargic. Then came their sudden resignations from work, which, in a small town like Bundaberg, couldn't go unnoticed. Jacob quit his odd jobs as a mechanic, citing feeling unwell, while Tanya simply seemed to stop showing up for her shifts at the hospital. It was as if they were both trying to disappear from public view, to vanish. The culmination of their suspicious behavior was their desperate attempt to sell Jacob's car for half price, explaining it as an urgent departure. These actions weren't just questionable. They screamed of something wrong, like red flags waving in. The wind of suspicion. Meanwhile, reports began trickling into the police station from neighbors. Initially, they hadn't paid much attention to ordinary domestic quarrels. But now, in light of Fiona's disappearance, these memories took on a sinister cast. In the days leading up to Fiona's disappearance, screams had been heard coming from Jacob and Tanya's house. Loud, sharp, filled with anger. One evening, a neighbor heard a long, tense argument that ended with a deafening thud, as if something heavy had fallen. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary quarrel, perhaps over money or household issues. But now, these recollections, like shards of ice, pierced their consciousness, forcing them to reevaluate the events. The couple's silence, their avoidance of contact, their attempts to flee, all of it formed an ominous mosaic pointing to their involvement. Investigators understood. They needed a strong reason for a search warrant. Gathering all the circumstantial evidence, the suspicious behavior, the strange screams from the house, the sudden resignations, and the attempt to sell the car, the police obtained a search warrant. No one knew what they would find inside. But a heavy, oppressive sense of dread hung over Bundaberg. The tension had reached its peak. The abyss revealed. The day of the search became a turning point in the case. Police cars silently pulled up to Jacob and Tanya's house. Officers with grim faces entered. With each passing minute, the tension grew. Every corner, every room was searched with meticulous care. But nothing was found until one of the investigators noticed a small trap door in the floor, leading to the basement. The basement. The stale air, permeated with the smell of damp and dust, seemed to press down. In the dim light of their flashlights, they saw an old, worn carpet, carelessly thrown in the middle of the dirt floor. Beneath it, officers discovered what would forever change the course of the investigation, transforming it from a missing persons case into a murder inquiry. Under the carpet were small, brownish stains, dried. Their color and consistency immediately suggested blood. Nearby lay fragments of rope with dried fibers. Forensic experts immediately set to work. The analysis confirmed their worst fears. It was Fiona's blood. Her blood, in her own home, or in what had once been her home before it became a crime scene. It was a horrifying blow, but this was only the beginning of the nightmare. Just the first layer of truth uncovered. The search continued in the area adjacent to the house. The overgrown backyard bordered a small wooded area. It was there, deep within the thickets, that fresh traces of a bonfire were discovered. It had been recently extinguished, but still carried the smell of char and smoke. In the ash among the charred remains, officers found fragments of fabric. Although severely damaged by fire, the experienced eye of the experts immediately recognized them as parts of the very jacket Fiona had been wearing on the evening of her disappearance. The last, fire-scarred, but irrefutable remnants of Fiona. There was no longer any doubt. Fiona Bishop had not simply vanished. She had become a victim. Jacob and Tanya were arrested. The curtain that had concealed their normality fell, revealing a monstrous truth. The accomplice's confession. From that point, events unfolded rapidly, yet with agonizing pain for all involved. The story took an unexpected, repulsive turn when Tanya Bromley, broken by the pressure and perhaps by a surge of guilt, made a deal with the prosecution. She spoke, and her words revealed an abyss no one had ever suspected, exposing the true motives and horrific details of the crime. Fiona had fallen victim to their shared fear and paranoia. It turned out that Jacob Wood suffered from uncontrollable fits of jealousy and an all-consuming paranoia that bordered on madness. He was convinced that Fiona, with her kind and open heart, was reporting them to the police. Reporting them because of their past, which they had worked so hard to conceal. 5 years earlier, Jacob had received a suspended sentence for drug possession. This fact constantly hung over them like a sword of Damocles, and Jacob lived in perpetual fear of exposure, convinced that any outsider who knew them could become a threat. This simmering resentment, this irrational fear, like poison, gnawed at him from within, turning him into a ticking time bomb. And Fiona, with her naive kindness, her willingness to help, became the perfect target for his delusional suspicions. Tanya, she was caught in a cruel trap. She feared Jacob, his outbursts of rage, his unpredictability. She witnessed his paranoid fits, his obsession with imagined threats. But she was weak, dependent on him, and couldn't find the strength to resist. On that fateful night, when Fiona, tired after work, returned home, Jacob was already waiting for her. Madness gleamed in his eyes. He lunged at the girl, accusing her of betrayal, of turning them in to the police. In a fit of rage, he strangled her. Tanya was there. She saw everything. She was paralyzed by fear, unable to intervene. Then the couple, terrified by what they had done, but driven by a primal fear of being caught, tried to cover their tracks. To burn the body in the wooded area behind the house, to destroy the evidence in the basement, to erase Fiona from this world, as if she had never existed. Tanya's confession shocked even experienced investigators. It uncovered not just a murder, but an abyss of human degradation hidden behind a facade of normalcy. The price of silence and cruelty, this turning point shattered all illusions. Beneath the guise of respectable, reserved individuals lay suppressed anger, all-consuming fear of exposure, and an unhealthy, toxic codependency that led them to such a monstrous crime. Jacob was not merely a jealous man. He was an individual incapable of confronting his own shadow, his inner demons, which ultimately consumed him and extinguished an innocent life. His paranoia was not merely a character trait, but a deadly disease that afflicted not only him, but everyone around him. Tanya, by becoming an accomplice, fell into the trap of her own weaknesses, fear, and inability to resist evil. Her silence that night, her complicity in concealing the crime, all of it became her sentence. She bore as much responsibility for Fiona's death as Jacob, albeit for different reasons. She could have stopped him, but she didn't. She could have reported it to the police, but she didn't. Her fear was stronger than her moral principles. The conclusion of this story evoked a storm of emotions among the citizens of Bundaberg and throughout Australia. The court process was agonizing and lengthy, each day revealing new, horrific details. The courtroom was packed. Fiona's relatives, journalists, ordinary citizens yearning for justice. The court delivered its verdict. Jacob Wood, life imprisonment without parole. His act was too monstrous to grant him any chance of freedom. Tanya Bromley, 12 years for complicity and concealment of the crime. Her fear did not excuse her involvement in the murder, but her confession helped uncover the truth, and this was taken into account by the court. Fiona's mother, tormented by grief, who had flown from Brisbane for the verdict, rose to deliver words that would long be remembered by journalists and everyone present in the courtroom. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held an incredible resolve. "I lost my daughter," she said, struggling to hold back tears, "but may this truth become the beginning of someone's salvation." She spoke not only of her pain, but also of the fragility of trust, the importance of recognizing signs of trouble in others, how easily one can destroy another's life by succumbing to one's own fears and vices, and how crucial it is not to remain silent when one sees evil. Her words became Fiona's legacy. Epilogue: Remembering. Fiona. Fiona Bishop's story is not merely a criminal chronicle. It is not simply a tragic incident. It is a grim reminder of how easily trust can turn into tragedy. Fiona was not an enemy to her killers. On the contrary, she sought to be part of a small community to help and support. Her openness and kindness, her willingness to offer assistance, her purity, these very qualities, paradoxically, made her a target for those who could not confront their own demons, who allowed fear and hatred to consume them. Today, on the outskirts of Bundaberg, where this terrible tragedy once unfolded, a young eucalyptus tree grows. It was planted by schoolchildren in Fiona's memory, so that her life would not be forgotten, so that her death would not be in vain. Each year, flowers, fresh, vibrant, symbolizing purity and hope, appear at its base. This is a symbol that even in the darkest stories, people find the strength to remember the light, to remember goodness, and to carry it forward. Fiona Bishop's memory will forever remain in the hearts of Bundaberg's residents, as a bitter reminder and as a quiet but insistent call to be vigilant, to cherish kindness, and never to forget that even in the calmest and most peaceful places, the darkest shadows of the human soul can hide. What lurks behind the masks of the ordinary people we see every day? How far can fear go if left unchecked? And what makes us look away when we see troubling signs, hints of hidden darkness? Fiona Bishop's story forces us to reflect on many things.